All right, and we are live. I am all by myself today. Unfortunately, Dina cannot join me. She has other commitments and she cannot be part of today's show. So I'm going to talk to you about how do you know that you are thinking critically? And I'm going to share with you specific tools of how to think critically in order to avoid being biased and in order to avoid manipulation, which is quite popular among JWs. So hopefully you'll stick with me. All right. Thank you for being with me. And we're going to talk about why. Oh, why for Jehovah's Witnesses, who a lot of them are very intelligent people. A lot of them, they're running big businesses. Some of them are university educated. I mean, for crying out loud, they have lawyers and doctors as well. They have architects and engineers in Bethel. They have some smart people in there. And yet, for some odd reason, critical thinking is a struggle. Is a struggle for majority of them. Why? It was struggle for us as well. Because for crying out loud, we were not dumb. We were not stupid people. We had our own brains and we were thinking and we were analyzing. And for comparing to most people out there, we were studying a lot. We had much deeper knowledge about the Bible and the history and about the world and other religions. As a matter of fact, more than an average person out there, didn't we? I mean, you ask, majority of Catholics or even people from other Christian denominations, open the Bible and find scriptures and so on, and they would not be able to do it. Most of them just maybe remember 2 or 3, 5 scriptures the most, and they think, they have all the secrets. And yet, Jehovah's Witnesses knew. They knew quite a bit. There was constant studying, there was constant learning, there was constant testing you on what you're learning, and one more a really important thing. We were all teachers. And that is huge. You might think that's a small thing. No, it was a gigantic difference between us and any other religion. Because when you are a teacher, whatever you teach becomes part of you. It becomes like, this is what I represent. And when you're teaching, it goes into the deepest part of your memory. Anything that you're teaching, okay, you will remember. It's like if you're listening to me passively right now, chances are 90 something percent you're gonna forget by an hour from now. Like the statistic is crazy. And if you are very interested in the subject, I think you will go like to 15-20%. If you're participating, if you're like actively listening and taking notes, it will go up to like 10% extra. And I think oh yeah, if you're doing something, so if you're learning and doing something at the same time, then you will remember about 50% of everything that was taught to you. But if you're teaching, you will remember 96% of everything that you're learning. So one great thing is, now that you know this, remember, if you want to learn a specific skill, if you want to learn whatever it is, if you want to remember something, learn it as though you're gonna teach it to somebody else. Because then you will remember and you will be able to explain it to others, and it will become part of you. It's not something that it comes in one ear and comes out other ear. When it comes to critical thinking, why GWs had such a hard time? So I'm going to walk you through some steps, not all the steps, but some 6 steps that can help you to see whether critical thinking is part of your life, whether you know how to think critically, and why thinking critically was such a big challenge for Jehovah's Witnesses. So, first thing, formulate an open question. Formulating an open question is extremely important when it comes to when it comes to finding out what is real and what is not. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses really had a hard time with that because when you are a Jehovah's Witness, think about it. You are studying, let's say, Watchtower, and you have certain questions in the Watchtower, and there is a paragraph that you're reading, and there is a question already given. Open up any Watchtower out there, and you will see enormous amount of presupposing questions, questions that lead you to a specific answer. They don't have an open questions where you can go one way or the other way. There's no such thing as did you learn something? It's what did you learn? It presupposes that you learned something. It's not they will never ask you did you have any blessings? What blessings you had? They will never tell you did you how was the assembly? No. What did you enjoy about the assembly? It presupposes that you actually enjoyed something. So there is an answer already in the question, and it's leading you towards the answer that they want to hear. Because if they would ask an average person, how was life in Bethel? The person would tell you, hey, you know what? Bethel was, okay, this is what I like. This is what I didn't like. This is what drove me crazy. This is how it was on Saturdays. This is how it was during the day, and so on. They will tell you how they felt. But if you ask them, what blessings did you have while serving in Bethel? That is a totally different question. So they formulated questions that would presuppose the answers. And you're thinking only about this category that they already gave you. The very common is, what proofs do we have? It's a very common question that Jehovah's Witnesses use. What proofs do we have? What proofs do we have that the governing body is a channel of communication with God? Now, if you formulate the question that way, you will never have a good answer. They will never ask, is the governing body a channel of communication with God? Because that opens up two possibilities. It is or it isn't. But if you ask, what proofs do we have that the governing body is a directed by Holy Spirit's channel of communication with God, then people will only look for proofs. The things that they said, the things that came true, the things that worked out, the things that people benefit from. They will only look for the things that confirm that information. They will never look at the other side. And that is one of the major problems. Because if you can control the questions, you can control the answers. And people think that they are coming out with the answers themselves because they didn't tell you what to do. They just asked you a question and you thought you answered yourself. And yet you answered what they wanted you to answer. That's part of manipulation. That is part of being biased. That's part of not thinking critically. That is part of manipulating people's minds into a specific outcome. There are questions that these people are asking constantly, but if you would take them to the court, the actual court, constantly, those questions would be rejected because they are leading questions. You're leading the witness. You're not supposed to ask this. You're supposed to ask questions where they will allow a person to think one way or the other, not just the way you want to think. So the first thing is, if you want to think critically, you have to learn how to ask the question. In order to have a better quality answer, you have to ask better quality questions. And very often, when you cannot find a good answer, it's because you're not asking the right question. And it was part of me waking up. I remember when I was like, I can't find the answers. I can't find the answers. And I'm like, maybe I'm asking the wrong question. If I will ask a different question, I will get a different answer. If I ask a better question, I will get a better answer. At the beginning, I remember when I was trying to wake up my wife, right? Like it was really hard. She was putting up a big fight, and there was tension at home. So I'm like asking her questions, but she's fighting me back. I can't persuade her. So I went to a whole bunch of actually of meetups, and I found people online, and I started asking them questions, right? Like, how do you wake up your wife? How do you wake up your wife? How do you wake up your spouse? And they couldn't answer because majority of them lost their spouses and their relationship fell apart. or they woke up both at the same time, so it was easy for them. But one person wakes up and the other one years later is still fighting for it. It was really hard. So I realized I am asking the wrong question because I'm not getting the right answer. So I went back to the same people, or I asked other XJWs, if you would go back in time, what would you do different in order to save your marriage? And that gave me a much better quality answers than how did you wake up your wife? Because I couldn't find the right answers. Besides, I found through that one question, I found what mistakes people have made. And that helped me avoid the same mistakes in my marriage, in my process. So a lot of times, if you think you're getting the wrong answers or you're not getting the ones that you are looking for, it's simply because you didn't ask the right question. Change your question, the answers will follow. So that's one. Second one is gather information, non-biased information. What does that mean? Jehovah's Witnesses were gathering enormous amount of information. The problem was it was all biased. Means it was only from one source. And that source, of course, always looked for the answers that would fit them. They would never give you an objective reality of this is one point of view and another point of view is here. I remember when I put away JW Bible and I started studying a Catholic Bible, but the Catholic Bible, sorry, it was written maybe Protestant Bible. I think Protestant Bible. And he had Bible scholars commentary underneath the text. And I'm reading the commentaries, and guess what? In the commentaries, there is 2 or 3 different explanations of the same scripture. There's like explanation 1, explanation 2, explanation 3. And it says, we don't know. We don't know what it means, but there's 3 possibilities. And I'm like, what? Even in that Bible, he had more than one information and more than one scholar that would quote that would quote, okay, this scholar thinks this scholar thinks this, that scholar thinks this, and there's discrepancies about the interpretation of some scriptures. And then that really expanded my mind because like, oh, there is more than one explanation, and it's all hypothesis. We're out thinking that that's what could possibly mean, but that doesn't mean that that's what it means. We all have an opinion, and the opinion can be very biased. Even the Bible scholars could be biased. We all have certain presuppositions of what things mean based on our previous experiences. We experience certain things, we're convinced of certain things because of what we were exposed in our life prior to this moment. And when we want to go forward, of course, when we read a question, when we have a problem that we want to solve, we're going to solve it based on the information and experience that we had in the past. We can't possibly resolve the problem on the information that we never received or the information that will come tomorrow. No, we can't. So we all have biases. And one of the way that scientists are trying to avoid biases is that, let's say they do experiments, and what they do is they give testing to different labs, minimum 3, but usually a lot more than 3. And they don't communicate. They don't talk to each other because they don't want to influence one person to another. And it said, you do this testing, and you do tests on 1,000 people or whatever, and you do tests on 10,000 people, and you do tests on 500 people. And then after a year of testing, we're going to get together without talking to each other prior to this, and we're going to compare the results. And then you see what you have concluded and what you have concluded and what you have concluded based on the testing. That's how you get non-biased information. And it's still a challenge because people still have problem with, okay, this test was sponsored by a specific company that wanted a specific result. Or in this community, people were influenced by their culture or their beliefs or their religion or whatever it was, and the results came out a little bit different than somewhere else. So it's very difficult to come out with information that is non-biased. It's very difficult. So the way to protect yourself from it is always remember to gather information from more than one source, because one source could be very biased. They could be mistaken. it sound really legit, but just because it sounds like it's legit, it doesn't mean that does not mean that it is. So the fact that JWs were trusting the governing body fully, and they were cutting off any other information. They were saying everything else what does not agree with us is wrong. It's from Satan. It's misleading people. We need to shelter our people, keep the congregation clean from all the misinformation that is spread in this world freely. Now that in itself locks people's minds, and it's causing them to be extremely biased by saying whatever comes from the governing body, they know better than me. They are the experts in this field. Who am I to question them? They are the channel of communication with God. I am not. Therefore, my salvation will depend on obedience to the governing body. And boom, your information channel, it's locked. This is why they really have a hard time with critical thinking, because anything that disagrees with what they call the truth, which is the organization, is automatically called false. Now, later on, they might change it with a new light, but they're not going to admit that they've made a mistake. They just said that was our previous understanding. Now it's the new understanding. They will never say we were wrong. They'll never definitely apologize. They'll just say, this is what we believed back then, and that's it. We're moving forward. And the fact that we are changing our doctrines is a sign that the Holy Spirit is working in our congregation, and it's influencing our minds. And this is why it's a proof that God is directing this organization. That's a very biased information. That's a very one-minded, blind person that is trusting one channel only. So when you're gathering information, gather from as many sources as you can. And it's not an easy thing to do, because very often you could be listening to the same information from two different sources, and those two sources are also biased. So the more information you gather from many different sources, the better. But I would strongly recommend staying out of this thinking that, oh, I've heard something once, it sounded reasonable, therefore it must be true, or it sounded from a source that is very credible, then it's automatically true. Leave yourself a gap of, even though these people believe it, they could be mistaken. We believed very strongly, being Jehovah's Witnesses, that what they teach, what the doctrines are, that they are the truth. We were so convinced that we were going door to door to other people, trying to tell them, hey, we're right, you're wrong, join us or you'll die at Armageddon. But if you follow what we say, you will live forever on paradise earth. We were so convinced about this idea that we could spread this word at school, at work, door to door, street, no matter where we've been. That's what we were saying. So, of course, today, looking back, we're thinking, man, what was I thinking? Where was my head believing on this? But back then, we were convinced. So, if you could be convinced of something so strongly as you were of the doctrines of Jehovah's Witnesses, and then later on go completely the opposite direction, then remember, there are things today that you're believing, that you're convinced they're true, and you're going to find out a year from now, 10 years from now, that it's not, that it was all just your perception, because that's the information that you had at that moment. I remember I was arguing with my brother-in-law. We were sitting here in this room and ping pong conversation, this scripture, and then we're just trying to find who's right and who's wrong. And I thought I was right. He thought he was right. And then now, when I'm thinking about this conversation way back then, we were both wrong. And now my knowledge expanded. I think he still stayed where he is. So we could be wrong. We could be misled. We could be mistaken. We could be biased. But the more information we gather from different sources, the better chances. We're just increasing our chances of getting more to reality. You will never be 100%, but that's what it will help you. Next one, observe results. Observe results meaning this. If somebody makes a claim, you could trust them right away, or you can say, I'm not saying you're wrong. I just want to see results. If a Jehovah's Witness is telling you, we have the best religion, the most happy people on this planet, I'm like, okay, I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it's not. Let me watch the results. Let me watch the people. Are they all happy? How many of them have problems with depression? How many of them are unhappy? How many of them are they really more happy than an average person, right? Like, why are you making that claim? Based on what is the evidence that you are basing that claim on? Just because somebody told you we're the happiest people on the planet? Well, let's test the results. Let's see if we could put this claim into the test, because it's intellectually lazy to just accept everything as is. That's what it is. Imagine, okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say you travel to another country and there is somebody who's trying to sell you something. Let's say they're trying to sell you a little crystal, and they say, this crystal can cure you from any disease. You can have cancer and you can cure you from this disease. This is special from Himalayan salts and blah, 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 right? You're like, cool. It would be very intellectually lazy to say, I don't believe it. It's a whole bunch of garbage. Get this thing out of my face. Or the other side of the spectrum, when you say, okay, here's my money I'm buying, okay, and it will cure me from my tumor. Both sides would be very lazy. So what you could do is you can start asking questions, or you can actually, if you have time and money for this, you can put that claim into a test. So you can ask, like, okay, why do you make this claim that this crystal cures cancer? Oh, because my uncle had cancer and we tried everything, chemo and radiation, you name it, and the doctors did not give him a chance to live. For sure, he's going to die. And then somebody gave me this crystal and we put it right next to his bed. And guess what? The cancer disappeared. Even the doctors couldn't believe that this have happened. I mean, it was a miracle. One person. Now, we all know that cancer, even from stage 4, can disappear from your body on its own. It happened more than once to many people without the treatment or past the treatment, regardless. It happened many times. So what you want to do is you want to eliminate that error. You want to eliminate the past that it was a natural remission from the cancer, and it just happened coincidentally that crystal was brought to that person at that time. So in order to eliminate that kind of error, you would ask question, okay, let's say I would buy 1,000 of those crystals, and I would go to a hospital where there's 2,000 patients that have cancer, and I would shove those underneath random beds of 1,000 people, and then watch results. Will the 1,000 people who don't even know whether the crystal is there or not, would they have different results than the other 1,000 that didn't have that crystal underneath their beds? Would there be a noticeable difference? Can we provide a study, a statistic on this subject? Because your idea that, oh, I'm going to put this crystal underneath somebody's bed because you worked with my uncle, that's a very biased opinion. And you could be very easily persuaded and tricked, because you could actually see that, yes, it worked. I saw it. I saw that this guy was almost dead. And I knew that the doctors didn't give him a chance to live. And he's free of cancer, right? So we could become biased of those extraordinary claims simply because of some sort of coincidence that people made the connection. See, our brain is always looking for patterns. Always. It does not stop. This is how we survive. We're constantly looking for patterns in the nature, in our behavior, in other people. If we didn't, we would not survive. Like, you're driving a car and then you see red light, it's a pattern. You have to recognize that pattern. And if you don't stop on the red light, there will be severe consequences to you. So we always looking for patterns, and unless we have a reason to question, we will accept it as truth. So be very careful about these kind of claims where the results do not speak for the claim. So people can make a really outrageous claims, and you can see on the internet outright lies, no problem. Maybe people making crazy claims. Oh, you buy this and then we'll help you. And that one, oh yeah, you buy this water with silver or whatever it is, it cures cancer. And the doctors don't want to know it, don't want you to know about this. They don't want you to know about this. No, we have this remedy, we have this cure that the government doesn't want you to know about this. They're all hiding it from you. That's very, very common. Where people say those things in order to persuade people, because people are like desperate, like, oh yeah, the government lied to me before, now they're lying again, they are covering it. So observe the results, see if there are any visible results, see if there's any statistic done on this subject, see if there are people who went through the process, if they purchased this product, if they did something that people are claiming, and is that truth. See, Jehovah's Witnesses never did this, because if they did, you would show them a completely wrong. They only want to see what they were programmed to see. So when they saying, oh, it's the end of the world, yeah, I mean, you have to be blind, stupid, and dumb not to see the prophecies being fulfilled. Why? Because they're very biased. They're only looking for proofs that this is the end of the world, and what we see around fulfills the prophecy that Jesus mentioned in Matthew 24 or Mark 13 and Luke 21, whatever it was. So it's very biased. You have to put things to the test. And if you take all the claims that they make, you will see how they're not willing to observe the results. So they would say, oh, there's an increase in crime. Very often they're saying, oh, you hear so much more crime happening and blah, blah, blah. People before could leave their houses open and the crime was not happening. I'm like, if you had the button to go back in time, when would you go back in time? 100 years ago? Do you think it was easier? How about in the 40s, when the whole world was in a war? Was that better time? How about 300, 400 years ago? We had 100-year war. Yes, 106 years. That's how long it took to settle the war. And guess what? We had major pandemics, and we had back then the people were tortured simply for saying, I don't agree with the Pope, I don't agree with the king or whoever was ruling the place. They're tortured, heads cut off, burned to death in the middle of town. Was that better, or is it better now? Women had almost no rights. Genocide was happening right, left, and center. People were making games with gladiators where people were slaughtering each other and Christians were giving to animals to eat. That was reality for thousands of years. You're thinking today is worse. Based on what? Based on what? I show a statistic to my sister. What happened was this. 1 year, Toronto statistic when it comes to crime spiked up a little bit. And they said in the news that Toronto is worse when it comes to crime than New York City. Now, that among JWs, oh yeah, of course, the whole world is getting worse, and the Toronto is no longer a safe place to live. And we hear about all those things that are happening. I'm not saying that Toronto doesn't have crime, but in order not to be biased, I went online and I double checked the source. I wanted to test that claim that right now is worse than ever. And guess what? It's not that Toronto got worse. It's New York got better. New York, actually, their crime went down so low. It was the lowest in 70 years. The crime rate went so low. So it's not that Toronto got so much worse, it's that New York got better, and that's when the scale tipped. But for JW, it was like, of course, the whole world is getting worse and worse and worse. I'm like, okay, then look at even in Toronto, like the statistic from police. I showed her, she got so mad. She got so mad. It's like it just contradicted her belief system that the crime is supposed to be on the rise, and yet if you show her the totally different results that this world is producing, it just, she can't even go there because it does not match what they believe. So observe the results before you come up with your own opinion. The next one, consider implications. Consider implications because it's very important. When you make a decision, think about that a year from now, a 10-year from now, 30 years from now, especially in major decisions in your life. So you could be persuaded one way, but think about, why am I making this decision? Is it because it feels good for a moment, or is it really good for me? Is it good for other people? Does it have a greater meaning? So somebody, when you're young, okay, many young people made this mistake. They thought it was cool to smoke a cigarette. They thought, oh yeah, when I'm gonna be smoking cigarettes, the girls are gonna be after me. I'm gonna be this cool guy, and everybody's gonna think I'm an adult, right? And many young people started smoking cigarettes thinking it's gonna be the coolest thing ever. Yet the implication of that habit very often even cost them their life, or many problems later on, and they tried to quit and they couldn't quit. So think about the implications. If you could observe the result in other people's life who made this decision, judge by results, not what they told you. Don't judge by, oh, another friend told you, oh yeah, if you smoke you're gonna be cool and you're gonna get a girl. Think about it. That's how advertisement works. Why do you think they're putting this blonde, beautiful girl, and you're watching her and you're like, oh yeah, she is hottie, man, I love how she looks, and then everybody's happy, whole bunch of friends, and then boom, it's a beer commercial. What do you think is going to come out of the beer case? A blondie? But advertisers know that if you have specific feelings, you feel attracted to a beautiful woman, then they link in your subconscious a beautiful woman and the feeling towards her with their beer. You're going to go and buy that beer. It's crazy. We don't think it consciously, but it happens. And this is why the advertisers are using this all the time. Why do you think advertisers would use celebrities and pay like George Clooney $30 million for like 3 seconds clip when he's drinking coffee? I don't think he even says anything on that commercial. He just drinks coffee. That's it. And they pay him that much. Why? Because people have specific feeling towards George Clooney. And they're like, if this guy is drinking this coffee, I like him, I'm going to drink it too. So don't get persuaded simply because this authority figure in your head, okay, is telling you this. Look at the results. Look at the implications that you will have in your life. The problem with Jehovah's Witnesses, very often, they were not thinking about what are the implications in their life. It was all about obedience. If the governing body member is telling you, do this and don't do that, they did not think about the implications on their personal life. That didn't matter. The obedience mattered. So what I'm saying is this: if they said, don't take blood transfusions, they did not worry about the implications in their life. They could have paid the highest price for that one belief. It didn't matter. What mattered was obedience. But now that you're out of this and you don't want to just blindly think and follow somebody else, look at the implications in your life. Will this decision harm me? Would this decision harm somebody else? Would that be good for me, for others, for the future? Think about the implications of the decision, because you will be the one living with the consequences. You can blame somebody else for it. The next one, number 5, is consider other points of view. Now, as you know, Jehovah's Witnesses didn't want to consider other points of view, especially they didn't want to consider points of view of people who left the religion. That was the ultimate evil and the ultimate fear, to talk to what they call an apostate, people who actually learn something different than they do and they change their mind. So of course you can't talk to apostates because they will influence you. They have gangrene and they're like cancer, it spreads. You can't talk to them, it is forbidden, and if we catch you talking to them, there might be consequences to you as well. Now that you're out of this mindset, consider as many points of view as you possibly can, because you will increase your chances of finding out the real answers. I would say this: don't even accept anything as truth until you hear at least one opposing belief, opposing viewpoint. It's extremely important to have that in mind, because although the information could be skewed, but if you're asking two different people, you will be able to at least form a better viewpoint. So if you ask a Jehovah's Witness, should I join Jehovah's Witnesses? Is he biased? Of course he is. And he'll tell you all the good things about Jehovah's Witnesses. Without exception, they will all try to paint this picture like this is the best way of life and everybody should join. And this is why we go preaching, because although we're not perfect, but we're the best. And there is no better religion. We have the best Bible, the best understanding, the best religion, the best salvation. You name it, we have the truth. We have the best of everything. You ask an ex Jehovah's Witness, especially the one that is super resentful and lost a lot of friends, family, and maybe business and everything else, and they're freshly kicked out. Should I join Jehovah's Witnesses? Are they going to be biased? Of course they'll be biased. They're going to tell you absolutely not, because resentful people will not be able to see anything good. Somebody who is in love, they can't see anything bad. Somebody who's resentful, they can't see anything good. When you fall in love somebody, what's wrong with that person? Nothing. Some people might actually tell you, look out for this. I'm like, I'm completely blind. I mean, I just love the person. I want to be with the person. I want to be with them for the rest of my life. They are the best. And then when people are divorcing, are they still thinking the same? It's the same person. They were so in love before, they would do anything to see them and then just hold their hand and kiss and they would just do anything. And now they're like, I don't care if I will lose everything I've got. I want you to suffer. Yeah, that's what resentment does. And very often people who are divorcing, they are incapable of seeing anything good in their previous partner. And guess what? That's what happens to a lot of XJWs. They're incapable of seeing anything good among Jehovah's Witnesses. They can't see anything good in Jehovah's Witnesses or the organization. They're just completely blind. But before, they're like, we are the best. So listen to both sides. Listen to people who experienced something and listen to those why people left. Ask the people, what caused you to leave? Why did you give that up? Whatever it is, even when you make a decision of investing, let's say you want to invest in gold, whatever it is, right? When you invest in gold, and then it might be a good investment, it might not be a good investment, depending on the time and so on. But I would definitely ask, why is somebody selling gold? Why are you selling? Because one person will tell you, I remember this like it was yesterday. Many years ago, I wanted to invest in precious metals. And there was this guy who was promoting, he was saying, listen, inflation's going to happen. You got to protect your assets. One of the best investments that you can have in order to save your purchasing power is gold and silver. And I purchased quite a bit of it. I actually convinced a lot of my friends to do it as well, because I believe there will be a hyperinflation, that the dollar will lose its value, and in order to preserve or even gain money or purchasing power is to buy precious metals. I believe that so strongly that I turned all my investments into precious metals, and I thought, oh yeah, this hyperinflation is going to happen. Until one moment, I realized that the guy who was promoting this, He was selling gold and silver. That's right. He was a seller. So I'm like, if you are telling me to buy, but you are selling, then what the hell am I doing listening to you? And truthfully enough, gold and silver crashed. He knew what he was doing. I didn't. So please consider more than one point of view in order to protect yourself from making a big mistakes. So before you join any religion, before you join any club, political view, whatever it is, find out more than one point of view, and especially listen to those who used to believe it and then they changed their mind. I used to watch a lot of debates. I love the debates because when you watch professional debates, people will bring the best arguments to the table. They will prepare themselves to counter argue the arguments from the other side, knowing what they're going to be very often. So it was so educational when I watched Jewish people arguing with Christians, Christians against Muslims, Muslims against atheists, atheists against Christians, atheists against Jewish, and so on. Watch the debates. You will see more than one point of view, and then and only then you can say, "Oh, you know what? This makes sense, and that one doesn't." Right? Otherwise, you could be very blindly led into a path that later on you realize, oh man, I just wasted so much time because somebody persuaded me into one way of thinking. All right. And the sixth one, once you have all the information, once you have all the results that you could possibly see, once you have, good question and you see the results from other people and you hear and see and gathered all the information that was possible for you to gather, test it. Make a decision. A lot of people sit on the fence and they're scared because no matter which way they go, they know it's going to be painful. So they postpone the decision indefinitely and they're constantly sit on the fence. A lot of PMOs are doing this. They want it out, but they will be paying if they go out. They can't go back in because they don't believe it anymore. And they're sitting on the fence. I know because I've been there for many years. I was a PMO for many years. So I know it's tough. But here's the good part. You can test it yourself. So one day you can say, you know what? If I'm a PMO, let's say you're a PMO, physically and mentally out, and you don't know how things will be. You're scared out of your mind because you know if you stop going to the meetings, right, you might lose your family and so on. No. You don't need to write any letter to Jehovah's Witnesses. You don't need to, disassociate yourself. You could run a test. If you want to see how life will be if you leave for a short period of time. Say, you know what? Tell your wife, your kids, whatever, I'm going to stop going for 1 month or 3, whatever it is that you decide to do. And watch how they treat you, watch how things change in your home, watch how you feel about it, put it to the test. If it feels horrible, if you miss the congregation, if your family life is terrible and you can't picture your life without this, go back. It's your life, for crying out loud. You decide and you choose what you want to do. But if you see that, no, you know what, I feel so much better. I feel like my brain can breathe right now. I can live my authentic life. I don't have to explain myself over everything, and I don't have to listen to things I don't believe in anymore. Whatever it is, after 3 months, 6 months, whatever the time period is, test it and watch the results in your own life, how you feel about this. Very often people are discussing with me one of the toughest decisions that they have to make when it comes to leaving their spouse, because they realize that, okay, you know what, I'll give you an example. um People, one person wakes up, the other one doesn't, and at home it's so toxic when one person is trying to get the other person out and the other one is pulling them back in, that they don't, not only don't get along, but they hate going back home. They don't sleep together anymore. They're just living like roommates, not even friends anymore. It's very toxic. I usually tell people this: do whatever you can, okay, to save this marriage. And give yourself time. Give yourself 6 months, a year, two, whatever it is. Up to you. I would say a minimum 3 to 4 months, minimum. And during that time, you become the best version of yourself possible, the best spouse possible, the best father or mother, the best parent. And during that time, if you see that you have done everything you possibly could to save this marriage and it ain't working, it's not working, it's actually worse than it was before, then and only then make the decision. Because you don't want to live with the regret of, oh, you know what if I put the effort, what if I was different, I know I was angry, I know I was frustrated, I know I was unloading my frustration on my spouse, it wasn't right for me to do this, I know I was emotional. You don't want to live with regret, you don't want to make that big of a decision, okay, if you didn't put the effort. So do whatever you can, put your life to the test, and then watch the results, and then you give yourself time, like, okay, after X amount of time, then I'll make a decision. Because very often people get emotional for a moment and they make a permanent damage for a temporary problem. Don't make that mistake. So those are the things. So I'll remind you one more time. Number one, formulate an open question, right? Don't try to come up with a question that sways one way or the other. The other one, gather as much information as you possibly can. Look at statistics as much as you possibly can, because statistics usually involve a large amount of people. 3, observe the results. Hopefully, it's better to observe results from other people's experience, not your own. Okay? Consider implications. How will this decision make my life better, other people's life better, in a year from now, 10 years from now, and so on. Consider other viewpoints. Try to find out if somebody changed their mind. Did they purchase this product and then they sold it? Why did they sell it? They don't like it? You want to buy a car? Go find people who drive this car and ask, do you have problems with this car? How do you like it? You might find a lot better information, a lot more quality information about this vehicle than if you go to a salesperson and he will tell you all the good things, because of course he is biased. Test it on yourself and watch the results. Those are the critical thinking skills that will help you guide yourself in your life later. This way you will not be perfect at it, but you will increase your chances of making the right decisions. Okay, thank you very much for listening to me. I apologize, didn't read your comments. I'm going to turn to your comments right now. Hello. Hi, Christine from Vancouver. You're always watching. Appreciate it very much. And thank you for your work. I thought it was just... okay, hold on. Let me see this bigger. I'm a little blind. Thank you for your work. I thought it was just living where we do, that this circuit was just so inbred as psychotic. I understand this very well. I've come to understand it's green lit from the GB. All right, one day I might understand this. My critical thinking skills are not that sharp. All right, if you guys have any questions, or if you want to join me, I would love to see you guys. Oh, what did I press? Sorry. I would love to see you guys with me. So I'm going to post that link in comments. And if somebody wants to join me, you don't have to show your face. You can just sound. I would love to hear your experience. I wanted to know, how did you guys start thinking critically after waking up from the organization? Did you experience like growth, massive growth when it comes to critical thinking skills? And did you become biased also about other things? Did you become resentful about Jehovah's Witnesses and became blind to all the good that they're doing? Because that's very often it happens to many of us. It's like they say, from love to hate, it's only one step away. The pendulum effect. It goes from one side to the other side. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. There is some good and bad to everything and everyone. Some people think the Jehovah's Witnesses are like the worst religion ever. Oh no. Oh no, you have no idea. Study some religions, study some cults. You'll see that Jehovah's Witnesses were actually pretty decent compared to some really crazy religions out there, especially those cults where they cut themselves off completely from the world. They live in those compounds where young girls are being married at the age of 12, 13 to some old guy, and they produce as many kids like those fundamental Mormons and stuff like this. It's crazy stories. People are being branded. Yes, branded. Like they will burn their skin with a specific brand. And people are ready to do anything for the leader, no matter what the leader does. The leader is like the holy one, and they all worship him basically. Yeah, crazy stories. Jehovah's Witnesses were definitely not the worst religion. They are very clever, I would say, when it comes to indoctrinating people, because to have that much control over people's minds, people's who have access to everybody else, people who go to work, people who normally talk to all their neighbors, and I have family members who are not witnesses, and their belief system is so strong. It's like I mentioned, one of the reasons why it's so strong is because they're all teachers, but they have that level of control that these people would be willing to sacrifice their life or the life of their children because they believe that this is God's will. I remember when I had this conversation with my cousin who's a Catholic. He asked me if he came to this, like this blood transfusion, right? And doctor would tell me, you will not survive unless you take blood. Would I take it? And I told him straight, like he didn't believe it. He says, no. I know you believed it, but if he happened, I believe that you would take blood. And I told him, no, I wouldn't. You don't understand. Like, it was so deeply in me. I wouldn't. I was giving talks about this. I was helping people fill out their blood cards. I wanted to be part of the hospital liaison committee or whatever it was. Yeah, I would not take blood. I back then I would have died if I had that choice. But he asked me, what about your child? Like, if your child was dying, would you give it up, right? And that was tougher for me, even though as an indoctrinated Jehovah's Witness, I thought about this and I thought, if it was my child, I would allow it. I would allow it. I would not let anybody else to know, probably not even my wife. But I would allow it because I thought, hey, this is the child's life. I want to make sure that I protect that life. And if I made a mistake, then I will die. That child is not guilty of taking the blood transfusion because it was my decision, not theirs. So they're innocent. And the sin of taking the blood would come on me. As a parent, I felt like that would be the right thing to do. So that's how I answered. But I know a lot of witnesses who didn't have that. They were actually hoping that maybe the judge would take away their rights as parents in order for the child to take blood transfusion and survive. But many have given up their own children. So this is why critical thinking is so important, because we can make a major decision that will go one way or the other, and then we look back and we're like, oh my gosh, I was just so emotional, I was so misinformed, I didn't do the research, I didn't even know how to think, I didn't find the right answers because I didn't know what questions to ask. Do your homework, train yourself. This is, I would say, this is number one skill that you have to learn after leaving Jehovah's Witnesses, is how to listen. I made a video about this. You got to learn how to listen, because Jehovah's Witnesses were not listening. They were only preparing their defense when you were talking. When we went door to door and somebody was talking to us, we pretended we were listening to what they were saying. No, we were never listening to what they were saying. We heard them, but while they're talking, we were just preparing our defense to teach them, but we would never take their information as valuable because we knew the best. We had the truth. So who they are to teach us. So one of the first things you got to learn is how to listen, because other people could have very valuable information that you could benefit from. Learn how to listen with an open mind. Second is learn how to critically think. Learn how to evaluate the information. Learn how to look at things from different points of view, how to test the theories, how to come up with hypotheses, test them, and then come to some conclusions and check again. Learn what is a scientific method, why scientists use that method to determine what is real, what is not, how to avoid coincidences and biases, because your life could depend on it. Literally, with many decisions, who you marry, whether you take certain medication, how you're going to proceed with your life, how you're going to drive a car, all those things could have a major implication in your life and others. And if you don't learn how to think critically, you could be paying a very high price. Unfortunately, majority of Jehovah's Witnesses do not know how to think critically. They are very biased and they follow example of whatever the governing body says. And if the governing body makes a mistake or they're misinformed or they give you the wrong information, they will all follow to the same trap. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.